Absolutism is great, but since it gets invented in the year of 1610, or sometimes a bit later, before then we have to play the game without it. But don't worry, we have Absolutism at home, Province Warscore Cost. More specifically, the combination of both Province Warscore Cost and Province Warscore Cost against other religions. See, when that hits 100%, unfortunately you don't get to take any provinces you want for free. Rather, the Warscore cost of the province is at a minimum 1 war score. Hence that most of you are able to take 100 provinces with these builds, assuming you're not taking money or anything else. However, what's amazing about this is the fact that it could be any 100 provinces. You could annex the city of the world's desire 100 times over, or you could take over Slough 100 times. Whatever you end up doing, you end up taking 100 provinces each time, no questions asked. Best part? No absolutism necessary. Although do be careful, the poor creation cost and the slight amount of overextension may be problematic. You'll be fine. Disclaimers! There are two modifiers technically at work here today, Province Warscore Cost and Province Warscore Cost against other religions. And I'm going to be stacking both at the same time today, because by doing so, I'm going to be making a run that involves no culture flips, no religion flips, assuming you start as the correct religion, and no government flips, assuming you start as one of the correct governments. My argument for taking this liberty with the modifiers is that I think in practice, when you do stack Province Warscore Cost, you tend to be conquering the world anyway, and well, there's a lot more of the world that's not your religion than bits of the world that are your religion. Hence you tend to be able to use Province Warscore Cost against other religions, more or less most of the time anyway. But it's not a pure Province Warscore Cost video, let's be open about that. Otherwise, standard setup, achievement compatible, Ironman compatible. Let's go. So here we are today in the world, and for transparency's sake, I'm going to be getting two counters, one for the combined permanent Province Warscore Cost reduction, and one for just the Province Warscore Cost against everyone, not just different religions. So we have two counters, and well, guess who else has two counters? You. The like button counter as well as the sub button counter, and if you want to increase those, that would be appreciated. But with all that said and done, we begin today with, actually, any country. No, I'm serious. I routed this in a way you can use any country's national ideas. We will need to be a Muslim, and we will need to be a theocracy. But beyond that, we can have any national ideas we want. I'll showcase how you do it at home run yourself later, but for the technical section, literally any Muslim will work. So I'm naturally going to prove this as a random country in Madagascar, just again to prove a point that any country can achieve this, that is a Muslim. It's not even the worst country in Madagascar, there's a worse country next to it, but anyway, I digress. This is just here to prove a point. Anyway, Province Warscore Cost, yes, let's go. So now that we're in here, first things first, our ideas, and we have just one idea to do today. Diplomatic for 20 Province Warscore Cost, that's it. Now, if we're a Native American, we can also take indigenous ideas, they have 20% Province Warscore Cost in them as well. However, that means you have to play as a native, so we're not going to be doing that. We're just going to take the 20% from Diplomatic and move on. Now, the fun begins, the government reforms, and this is where a large part of this run is going to be based upon. We're going to get a couple. So we are actually, in this example, going to start as a tribal monarchy. Whatever you start with, you need to go ahead and reform into a theocracy. So let's do that now, and become a theocracy. There we go, we're a theocracy. Now, the thing is with theocracies, I'll demonstrate a specific build later, with some actual recommendations on what you should be taking on each tier. But for the purpose of just this run now, we can go ahead and move through these. The main specific ones that we're going to be taking a look at are going to be a bit later into the tree, so they are going to require you to make sure you're not half-stating the entire planet, and actually put some effort into getting your government reform progress going. So you have a lot of options at tier 10, I would recommend opening public elections. Now when this occurs, you're going to have access to the Theocrat versus Motorist mechanic, which on its own is quite powerful, but because if you're converting you can get some missionary strength from the Theocrats, as well as some Trons to the True Faith, compared to the Motorist, which can give you a lot of manpower recovery speed as well as another -15 war score cost versus other religions. That's going to be our first source of it, because you want to have the Motorists in charge pretty much most of the time. So go ahead and do that. And with that, we're going to be able to add another 15% Province Warscore Cost versus other religions into our counter. Finally, at tier 13, we need to go ahead and take one state under God. This is going to give us 30% Province Warscore Cost versus other religions, meaning that we're already getting 45% Province Warscore Cost just from our government reforms alone. Next, we need to get ourselves some monuments. The first one you're going to need to do is go ahead and get over to Kaba. This is going to give us another -10 Warscore Cost versus other religions. There we go, there's -10 from that. After that, we need to go ahead and take Malta, as this little island over here, and then build up the Maltese forts. This isn't tied to any religion, and when you get them at level 3, you'll be able to get another -15 Warscore Cost versus other religions. this, combined with the other things we mentioned earlier, is already going to be giving you 90 Province Warscore Cost, which is going to be enough for most cases and most countries, but it's not 100% that I promised you. And the final 100% that's available to every single country can be achieved by taking the military hegemon. Clearly a much easier thing for me to say than for you to do in an actual game, but it's enough to get ourselves over to 100% mark. My point being with this is that I have achieved this with just any theocratic Muslim. Any theocratic Muslim doing any other build can grab 2 monuments, take diplomatic ideas, and grab the military hegemon. That's just something you can do, and you don't need to work for any extra modifiers or anything else in the process. This is just something that you get as a Muslim if you go theocracy for the most part. Well, you will also need to get diplomatic ideas as well. But yes, a lot of the things I've mentioned here today are certainly easier said than done. And with the consideration that you may want to use this in your own game before the 1700s as well, let's talk about a build now that's actually built around Province Warscore Cost, and to actually use this modifier before the 1600s, and then obviously later as well. For your start, you have 2 options. I've selected Najd here, but you can also do this as the Rassids. With Najd, you're either going to be able to, starting as a tribal federation, reform into a theocracy, which you'll need to do for the government reforms later, or if you're starting as the Rassids, you'll need to reform into, well, the theocracy in question here. With Najd, the interesting thing is, though, you already have access to the Arabian mission tree for the most part. That includes all the modifiers that we'll need for this run. So you don't need to form Arabia per se, but this does come with the limitation that you don't have access to the Arabian ideas inherently. You still have a weaker version of them, like 1 mission instead of +2, and similar things like that, so it's not like you're missing out on too much. But if you do play the Rassids, well, their mission tree contains this mission here, which means that the Form Arabia decision will no longer require the admin technology, which means you have to form Arabia a lot earlier than you're meant to be. See, when you do form Arabia, make sure to take the new traditions and ambitions, as when you fill them out, you'll have access to this idea here for another -10 Warscore Cost versus other religions. This on its own can already replace the military hegemon for you, but there's other things to consider here. When you unite Arabia, or the homeland in this case, you get access to the Caliphal Ambition mission, which is going to give us a very interesting event. We'll be able to follow in the footsteps of Muhammad, and this is going to give us the Caliphate government reform early. It's also going to include an extra -10 Warscore Cost versus other religions inside that reform, which I find quite neat. The thing is with this reform that I think is important to realize is that this reform is accessible. By default, it is a monarchy reform, but if you've already become a Sunni, to become a theocracy, you get to keep being a theocracy, so you don't get yourself knocked out of theocracy by taking the Caliphate, which is quite nice. So there's another -10 Warscore Cost versus other religions, which at -20 Province Warscore Cost versus other religions is already starting to add up, but we can get even more. See, when we do complete our mission tree, we'll be able to enter our second Islamic Golden Age, which just means that if we're in a Golden Age, we can extend it by 50 years, or if you've already used the Golden Age, which you should at this point to take it early to get your first idea groups filled out, because you can reset it later, you can be able to take it again. This is also going to give us access to Unify Islam decision, giving you an additional 10% Warscore Cost versus other religions. That's this decision here. You're going to need to conquer quite a bit of the world at this point, but when you do, you'll be able to unify Islam, which will change your country to the Caliphate and give you a united Islam at the end of the game, giving quite a few impressive buffs in the process. This list will then include another -10 Province Warscore Cost, going to -30 overall. Now the thing is, of course, with this run is that even though you have Province Warscore Cost against other religions, you're going to notice that you are surrounded by a lot of Sunnis as well, so you won't be able to use it that effectively. Which is why I'd recommend a rather interesting section though if you are doing this in practice. So you have a bunch of Ibadi people over here in the Oman Hormuz area, and since it's not that hard when you are smaller or where you're either Rassids or you're in Arabia as Najd to come over here and take this land, I'd recommend doing so and then flipping Ibadi. Ibadi is probably, within my opinion, the strongest Muslim religion anyway. Of course this is disputed, but I maintain this opinion nonetheless. This also has a nice secondary side effect, however, of no one else around you being Ibadi as well. So you'll be able to use this Province Warscore Cost against pretty much everyone universally, which is quite nice. Let's now talk about government reforms. And there's a lot of things that work really well with your Province Religious War Score, especially if you go into religious ideas next. See, at Tier 2, we have an option of our missions. And here I would suggest the Mission of Protection, which is going to give you an extra missionary. Bear in mind, the Caliphate's giving you a missionary, you're getting the Missions of Protection for an extra missionary, and your ideas are giving you an extra 2 missionaries in your ideas. So you're already looking at an extra 4 missionaries so far. Quite impressive, but it gets better. See, at Tier 3, I'd recommend you take Education of the Missionaries, which will give you more maximum absolutism as well as 2% missionary strength.
That means at tier 4 you can also go into strengthening the lemma for, you've guessed it, even more missionary strength. Tier 5, up to you. I'm going to take organized military staff, but don't take this as a recommendation. Take whatever you want. At tier 6, however, strengthening religious head will give you even more maxed absolutism, which is never amiss. At tier 7, we have more options in front of us to take. If you've gone court for whatever reason, you can get +5 max absolutism here, but if you haven't, take anything else as well. It doesn't matter at this point. Neither does tier 8. At tier 9 you have the option for the fort defense I mentioned earlier, but there's other things as well. You can get some morale of armies if you want, as well as some potential dev cost if you desire to go that way as well. Or even the ability to see the monarch points of your selectable heir, as well as some tech cost, which is always nice. Now at tier 10 I would still recommend opening public elections and having the militarists in charge of your country the whole time. So at tier 11 you can pick up, don't laugh, another missionary, followed by either governing capacity or a lot of tax if you want to go that way, or even some manpower in accepted and same culture group provinces, or even the harmonization of cultures if you really want to promote a bunch of cultures. Whatever you end up taking is going to be up to you. I'm usually going to be taking the government capacity at this point, but again, it's up to you. Tier 13 is where it gets interesting. See, you no longer need one state under God because you already have 130 Warscore Cost versus other religions, if you've done the 30% extra from this route and you've done everything mentioned previously. So you have options. If you want the Great Holy War Casus Belli, it's here for you to pick up. You can also enforce religions through war cheaper, but that's up to you. Priestly autonomy is quite nice, giving you both 2.5 admin efficiency as well as some minimal autonomy in territories, which no one can complain about. State of Theologians at this point I find a bit disappointing with just advisor costs and possible advisors, but hey, if you want it, you can take it. And of course, divinities through craftsmanship. If you want money, 10 goods produced and 2.5 dev cost modifier is going to be quite nice. But if you're not deving, I can certainly see why you won't want it. Regardless, you have the choice of either 2.5 admin efficiency in practice to get even more admin efficiency squeezed out, or the Great Holy War Casus Belli if you want to go that route. Whatever you want to take, that's going to be up to you. Most likely, I'll probably just go for the admin efficiency at this point, but again, it's up to you. The monthly autonomy territory certainly doesn't hurt either. But there we go. If you still want to take the 30% Province Warscore Cost here instead, you can then not take the open public elections reform and take something else. Parliament, for example, is quite strong if you want to go that route, or even 15 max absolutism. And that also means that because you have more Province Warscore Cost to work with, you don't have to take the military hegemon to have 100% reduction. But that's going to conclude the video. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.